cannabis isn't super accepted by a lot of Maltese people. It isn't the sort of thing where it's an Amsterdam sort of feel. Like if you are a patient or if you have a home grow, you can consume it. I know people who do out on the street because you can smell it in passing. But it's not Amsterdam. It's not even Barcelona.
Bricks and Malta. Malta made history back in 2021 by becoming the first European nation to legalise adult use cannabis. However, other than homegrow, legal ways to procure products have been limited. But that's all set to change in early 2023 as Malta ushers in a wave of cannabis club licensing applications. Amna Shamim, Chief Growth Officer at Parsl, long-time industry advocate and island resident, gives us the lowdown.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Lobsterpot podcast. I'm Dave Barton and I'm something of a host, but I'm not just the only host. There is this other man as well. What's your name again? Jamie something.
Jamie something. We're not going back to nicknames again from the strange transcriptions of our videos where it decides it doesn't like my surname. But yeah, how are you, Dave? You all right?
I think so. I mean, at the current time of recording, I don't know if we need to put in temporal references, but it is nearly the Christmas holiday periods thing. And I'm kind of ready for it. I'm kind of here for it. But at the same time, I'm just not. But, so this is why work remains a kind of moment of respite in amongst all the madness. But, enough about me and my issues and the thousands of children I seem to have and all of the minor crises that happen on a daily basis for the sake of it. It's, not about us. It's about our guest today. And we have a very, very special guest, a lady by the name of Amna Shamim, who is a global cannabis intelligence network person, cannabis queen. Actually, she's the, industry advocate. And she lives in Malta, which is a nice little island in the middle of the Mediterranean and the first place in Europe to legalize cannabis recreationally. Is that right, Amna? Or have I got it completely wrong?
No, you've got it right. Fully legalized as of a year ago, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, a few weeks after I moved here. So everyone's like, is that why you moved? Possibly. But possibly. But no, Malta is fully legalized, but complicated because everywhere always is. It's never straightforward. So it's fully legal if you can get it, which you can't because the clubs are not yet open.
Now there's been sort of developments on that front. I mean, how does it currently operate? Because you can have home grow, can't you? And you can basically gift it to someone if you're sort of growing, but you can't sort of procure it in the way you can in a dispensary, such as in the US, for example.
Right. So there is medical cannabis. And so there are doctors you can see and you can get prescription cannabis, which is flower, and I believe there are some oils, but flower is the main way. But of course, this flower is not to the quality standard of the flower, say, in the US, even if that's medical, because it's irradiated and it's, I'm trying not to piss people off here, but forget it. I'm going to just piss people off. It's really bad flower. It's not great seeds. And then it's been irradiated. And you can tell if you were to smell it that this is not going to be such a great experience. And it's missing a lot of the terpenes and other things that really make cannabis as effective as it generally is. So there's that. Then you can grow, and there's a limit as to how much you can grow. And of course, you can't be allowed to see your plants from the street. So expect to spend a lot on electricity. And then if you have flower, you can gift it to people. You can't sell it. And there are some rules around who you can gift it to. But if you guys, for example, were to come to Malta and didn't know me, good luck getting anything because the clubs are not open and you're not going to be able to really find a doctor and get the whole process sorted out on holiday because the timeline to be able to access cannabis medically is very slow.
So it's not going to be, there's going to be kind of a sort of a replacement for Amsterdam because they want to crack down on tourists and stuff. It's not going to happen like that anytime soon in Malta because, again, big popular tourist destination. Predominantly amongst us limey Brit people who sort of come over for a bit of cheap sunshine. But we're not going to be coming for cheap weed anytime soon, you don't think?
I don't think so, because as of right now, and of course everything can change, but as of right now, the deal with even the clubs is that you have to be registered there, and there's a limit to the number of people who can be registered. So in Barcelona, you can walk in and you can pay your 20 euros and become a member, and now you're a member and you have access and it's all fine. So it's easy to be a tourist. Because of the limits on the number of club licenses and then also the number of members, I think it's going to be very hard for tourists to come in and access even the recreational cannabis here.
What's the kind of, I suppose, what's the cultural feeling of cannabis in Malta? What's the kind of, I suppose, reaction to it? It strikes me as very interesting that it becomes the first place to make it recreationally legal, at least in some ways, in some ways, and yet doesn't seem to have kind of pushed it and actually made it a thing. Is that because it's not particularly well kind of sought after? What do you think the reason for that is?
Well, so now this is Maltese gossip. So this is not something I can prove, but this is the sentiment among the Maltese. So Malta fully legalized about a year ago, but about 2 years ago, there was a lot of upheaval in Malta, and there's this whole thing. This journalist was killed because she was investigating what was happening, some corruption in the government, and the government was implicated in the death. And so now there's been some progress in this case, but Malta was, people were really unhappy with Malta, and they were trying to get some positive PR for themselves. And so they pushed through, look, it's legalized, but we have no plan for how we're actually going to do the rest of it. And so, again, this is Maltese gossip. This is not proven, and please don't come after me, Maltese government. But the word on the street seems to be that they did this just for the positive PR. But cannabis isn't super accepted by a lot of Maltese people. It isn't the sort of thing where it's an Amsterdam sort of feel. Like if you are a patient or if you have a homegrow, you can consume it. I know people who do out on the street because you can smell it in passing. But it's not Amsterdam. It's not even Barcelona.
Right. Wow. So it's kind of like, do you think that will be a kind of, do you think as a kind of, you get kind of clubs opening up and things like that, there's going to be more of interest in it? Or do you think it's still going to take, it's going to be a bit of, for want of a better term, a slow burn in terms of local adoption and,
I think so. There's a lot of expats in Malta, and it's very interesting to a lot of the expats. And then it's interesting to young Maltese people who are right now growing their own. And I think the ability to go to a club and have it be a social thing, like going to a bar, will be appealing. But among the older generation, it's very much a slow burn, which is, I think, the case in a lot of places.
It's funny that it's kind of panned out like that. Do you think it will in any way catch up eventually? Or do you think it's just, it has, again, it's just gossip, but do you think it was just done as a PR thing and now it's just left and that is kind of what it is? It's almost been forgotten about in a way. People who are excited about the industry, in different demographics, or people who are just interested in it generally, probably speaking very positively about the fact you can have it there in theory, but the reality is that it's not actually a thing. And will it be, do you think? Not necessarily put a time on it, but is it going to get there, or is it just a kind of almost like a drop in the ocean? Really, it just feels a bit like someone made a big grandstand and then left it.
I mean, I think it's going to get there because I think everywhere in the world just about is going to get there. It's a question of timing. So I think it's going to get there. I think it's going to be a lot slower than the world thought it was going to be when Malta legalized, because there are things happening right now. For example, there was the plant medicine clinic in Malta, which was phenomenal. It was run by a local doctor who is absolutely incredible, biased, my doctor. And you would go in and the level of care that you would get is unlike the level of care that you get from most medical practitioners. Like you would go in and you would have an actual deep dive conversation about all of your health, and you would get a prescription and then you would get your card and then you would be able to access it. That could take anywhere from a month to a couple months. And then you would go back in for a follow-up. And like there was a really high level of care. That clinic has closed because the government has rolled back the ability to do certain things that were implemented that made medical cannabis more accessible here. Because there was pushback from the pharmacy groups, and there was pushback from a couple different groups. I don't remember all of them. And so there was progress that has been made, and that was just in the medical space, and it's been rolled back. So I am personally not feeling super optimistic that it's not going to be a one step forward, two step back situation also with recreational.
That's interesting. I mean,
And we had another thought. They had put, I can't remember her name, this woman in charge of cannabis, and they canned her about 10 months into her tenure, and now there's someone else in charge. And so it kind of depends on how they do. And they're not known to be. It's politics everywhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, is healthcare free in Malta? Is it, like we have the NHS here in the UK, and you pay for prescriptions? Does a similar model work for, all medicine as well as medical cannabis?
I mean, I believe so, but as an expat, I don't have, with the visa I'm on, which is the digital nomad visa, I cannot earn money here, which means I'm not contributing to taxes, which means I am not eligible for it. So I have separate healthcare.
Right.
So I am not clear as to how their healthcare works because I'm not part of that system.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. I mean, it just feels very, very confused. Now, what's the actual kind of size of Malta in terms of population? That's a real put you on the spot question, that is. But it's
that one I know.
No Googling. Okay. No Googling. Yeah.
No, that one I know because I find it really funny. So the population of Malta is about 500,000 across all three islands. Mm-hmm. In the summer, when all of you guys show up, it's about 2.5 million. At least that's what I was told. But when you arrive in Malta and you are going down the escalators to baggage claim, there's a sign from one of the taxi companies that says population of Malta, 500,000 and 530,000 or so. Population of Malta that uses our app, 550,000. It's like extra 10,000 are tourists or 20,000 are tourists.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's just a very kind of strange way for everything to have unfolded. You mentioned the lady that was in charge was kind of canned. Was that because poor performance, or just because the kind of government's a bit lost on it generally, or what was the? It
depends on who you ask. There are people who believe it's poor performance. There are people who believe that the government held her back. Regardless of what the situation was, no progress was made. And I think this was the killer part, she wasn't good at sharing what was happening. And so the public just had zero updates.
Yeah, it's kind of, that's really the problem. When you're backed by something that is really 2D, it's going to be very difficult to make it a success without the kind of backing that you would really need to get from it. Cannabis clubs in general are really interesting models, usually exist because of loopholes as opposed to anything actually being put in place for them. Do you think, I suppose, clubs generally, if outside of tourists, will really get much traction? And do you think it is something that Malta will figure out in the coming years, that maybe it is a good source of additional revenue, it does have kind of economic benefits?
I think initially the clubs will actually be the members will mostly be people who are here, people like me, for example, who are here on different, we have a lot of digital nomads and a lot of expats and a lot of people who are not Maltese, but who have come here for work and who are here. And so I think these groups are going to make up the initial membership, because the clubs seem to be also run by a lot of foreigners who are here. I mean, other Europeans who have been able to come here and set up businesses. Because there's a lot of
offshore gaming companies and things like that, and lots of kind of fintech and things like that, if memory serves. I mean, it's weird. I mean, I haven't been to Malta since I was a kid. I think I mentioned to you, back then it was kind of like, it was just a big rock with lots of sunshine and lots of beaches, and there wasn't much else in between, kind of thing. And it was like a big sort of party island to some extent in certain areas, but again, it was kind of an anomaly compared to a lot of other, because it is just kind of like a remote out in the med by itself. And I don't know, it used to be a haven for pirate videos when I was a kid. So I remember trying to get Terminator 2 on like VHS and you could get that. It was in the cinemas. I'm like, wow, this place is amazing just based on that alone. And now you're sort of saying, well, cannabis is a thing here. It's sort of like, oh, that adds a kind of new appeal to the kind of mystique of Malta. I don't know. And it's kind of like, if you had these clubs and this kind of like, not saying it becomes like this sort of den of iniquity or something like that, but it's almost like there is this whole, okay, there's a sort of countercultural feel, maybe. I don't know. Do you feel like that's the thing, or is that just, I'm just making it up, basically?
So my take on this, and again, this is my take, is that in Malta, they're trying really hard to diversify, and they're trying really hard to become a stronger nation, which is great. Because right now, their biggest industries are iGaming, internet gambling, and tourism. And I think they got really hard hit during the pandemic, of course. And so we're coming out of it. Tourism is booming again. And of course, gambling has always been booming. And so now they're pushing for having first mover advantage in different industries, like fintech, like cannabis, like psychedelics. But I think that they're doing it and they're getting really excited about this stuff, and they don't have a clear plan. So Malta many years ago was supposed to be, we have fabulous internet here because they laid all the groundwork. They wanted to be, I forget what they were going to call it, but like a digital city where it was going to be all super high speed and built for all of this. And, this is where you can come and do all your internet work. And that fell apart. And I think they get excited and hyped up because it's a great idea and they don't have a plan. And I really love the Maltese people. I've had wonderful experiences with them. The government, like many governments, is very disorganized. And because they get, like, for example, my visa. I came here last year and my visa, the woman I dealt with at the government was like the nicest government agent I've ever dealt with anywhere in the world. She's a delight. And the process was super easy. Not easy, but super straightforward. And when something was missing or wrong, she was very helpful. And the renewal process is one of the most painful things I've ever gone through. And so I think from what I've talked to with other people who have been bringing businesses here, is they feel the same way. And I know of a business, and I can't name it because it hasn't been officially announced, that was supposed to come to Malta and has been putting years of groundwork in. And it is probably about to pull out because it's been so frustrating. And they're like, we can't tie our business to Malta if we're already hitting these roadblocks. And so I think this is representative of how Malta does a lot of things, because I've seen it here. I know of a business that's leaving, Paxia as well, Panaxia or something, also pulled out of Malta. And so it's,
And
good idea, bad plan.
Yeah. And in terms of the sort of cannabis industry, where do you think Malta will be? I mean, again, this put you on the spot a bit, in sort of 5-10 years. I mean, is it kind of like, do you think there could be a sort of thriving sort of, group of kind of, consumption lounges, clubs, things like that? Do you think that will kind of segue a little bit into the sort of tourism aspect, or do you feel like it's, is it going to kind of quell stigmas locally as well? What's your kind of, again, this the reality and there's the hope, isn't there? What's the hope?
My hope is that by 10 years from now, the whole world should be different. I mean, the US is super slow, and Mississippi, which I don't know if you've been to Mississippi, but it is not the most
been through it,
first mover state with this sort of stuff, but they're legalizing. Like a lot of states, North Dakota, like these things are on the ballot. The US is moving forward. I mean, Mexico, I'm looking at Mexico and I'm expecting big things. I think in 10 years, the world will be a very different place for cannabis because some of the big players are going to not topple, but come to accept. I hope the US will. And I think as a result, places like Malta also will be there. But I don't think places like Malta will be first mover. And I'm feeling a little less optimistic about Europe right now than I did a year ago. Having looked at the German laws, looking at what the UK, what you guys are doing. It's good, it's progress, but it's slow. It's a lot slower than I expected.
Yeah.
So unless things change, the way the governments around the world are moving, it's very, very slow.
Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of reality, isn't it? It's, it's having that, this could happen. All the groundwork set. Should there be momentum, but it's almost getting, I mean, this is the problem here in the UK. It's just not on anyone's political agenda. It's not even a thing. It's, you know, medical cannabis is the best kept secret that we have here, you know, 20,000 patients out of a nation of 66 million people. It's like, you know, lots of kind of moving pieces need to sort of fall into place a little bit in order for that to kind of change a bit. And, you know, medical professionals and acceptance and blah, 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 all that being the case. But you'd almost think that in a sort of smaller nation like Malta, it would be easier to sort of garner momentum on the ground, because again, you've got tighter knit sort of communities, presumably, and people know each other's business. And if there's kind of like, we know this is going on, this is a thing, it kind of makes it easier or not. Do you know what I mean? It seems odd to there to be a kind of ambivalence rather than a kind of forthright or just complete rejection. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think there's a complete rejection, but and I think there is momentum on the ground. Okay. But I also think it's politics. It's just slow moving.
Yeah. This is it. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, you sort of said you were a digital nomad. I mean, compared to sort of other countries that you spent time in, I mean, where feels, you mentioned places like Mexico are quite progressive, or you hope that they will. Where do you think the next kind of big announcement, other than say somewhere like Germany or like, you know, Thailand, is there any way you're really sort of optimistic about that? Is this kind of a bit of an outlier that might just come in and go, boom, we're doing this properly? Or what's your thoughts?
I think the next surprise is going to be somewhere I couldn't even guess. Like, so my background is I was born in Pakistan, and I was floored when Pakistan was like, yeah, we're going to grow hemp because we have the perfect climate. It's from here and we need money. And I was like, yes, like that makes perfect sense. But that shocked me. Like, I had not heard anything about that. And of course there were whispers, but I think it's going to be somewhere like that where none of us are paying attention, and the government wakes up and goes, we can do this and we need money, because all the governments need money right now. And I think it's probably going to be something like it's going to be one of the nations, like maybe Nepal, that is doing some stuff with hemp and now goes, actually, let's try this cannabis thing. Places like Mexico were already watching. I think it could be somewhere out of Africa. Like Lesotho was growing, and some places in Africa are growing. Like, for all we know, it could be Ghana showing up and be like, actually, we're going to grow cannabis and we're going to process it and we're going to export it to Europe. You're welcome.
Yeah, we heard whispers of Zimbabwe from some interesting fellow we met in Manchester, who was, apparently he was going to go to Zimbabwe and revolutionize the tobacco industry.
What's his name? Fahad?
No.
Okay,
I can't remember his name. Him and his business partner turned up, and he was he didn't seem like your typical business partner, but he was very sort of Liverpudlian, and apparently loved science, and that's what we could get out of him. So, jury's out. So we'll see. But again, the idea that you could almost, build an industry and kind of overhaul things, create value, it's just freaking common sense.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like politics just gets in the way, governments get in the way, and it's kind of like, we talk to people from the US, and it's like, at least, for all of its flaws, it's happening, do you know what I mean? It's happening. And it might be that, other countries like Malta, it's happening, but it's not perfect, but it will get there. It just needs to kind of level out somehow with the right kind of push and, the right backing. And, I guess here doesn't feel like that at all. It feels just like, which is kind of unfortunate. But, again, it's that kind of domino effect. Germany will do it, and one of the biggest nations in Europe sort of does it, and everyone's like, "Oh, hang on, it's working there." Okay, you're making noises like you don't agree. What's your thoughts? Tell me.
I think Germany will be interesting to watch because of the legislation, where it all is very restrictive as to where it can be sourced from and what it can be. So I think I heard at one of the MJ Biz talks, someone was saying, "Oh no, this is just to get it through Parliament, and then there'll be some sort of not backdoor, but a bridge that allows the other types to come in and other things to work." And sorry, that's my bed. And if that's the case, then it'll be very different. But if that bridge doesn't exist, then what Germany has done is basically turn Europe into the US with federal illegality, where you can't import and export. And that it's another horrible slowdown and form of chaos. So Germany could be that, or it could actually slow down all of Europe. We just don't know yet.
Absolutely, absolutely, cool. Well, thank you so much. I think this has been really insightful conversation, and we don't know many people in Malta, so thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us about what you know on the ground. And we will speak to you soon, I am sure. And thanks for your time on that. It's been
Hope so.
always a pleasure.
Thanks, Sam.